All right, for those of you that are tuning in now, later after the live Zoom gathering, you missed the whole first part of our gathering because I forgot to hit record, but welcome. Now I'm going to continue on. Listen, we already took communion and the sin that I just committed was covered. So thank God that he's okay with the fact that I forgot to hit record. Anyhow, moving on. We're talking about Stephen and the fact that he was persecuted and stoned for his faith. People threw rocks at him and killed him because of his belief in Jesus. And you have a bunch of people that are incredibly stubborn. And I don't know about you, but I have a very hard time admitting that I'm wrong. And there's a pride in us that it's tough to say I'm wrong, I'm sorry, I screwed up. It's easier to text it, honestly. Whenever we do something wrong, it's even easier to text it, but to directly admit our imperfection and see other angles is sort of tough. So one of my absolute favorite quotes is this next one that you'll see here. It is impossible to teach a person something that they think they already know. It's impossible to teach a person something they think they already know. And I think one of our greatest obstacles to having a faith that's led by the Spirit of God, creativity, thinking outside the box, effectiveness in mission, really experiencing God is a lot of our stubbornness of we think we already know what the church looks like. We think we already know what discipleship is. We think we already know what mission is, and so we get stuck. We get sort of stuck because of what we think we already know. And so part of that deprogramming means that we come to the table with a clean whiteboard, or we actually have to erase a whiteboard that's full and think like a beginner again, right? So what is the church? What is a disciple? What is the mission of God? Like all those sorts of questions that we have to come back to the table and pretend like we don't know the answers, right? I mean, if you were to read the Bible and you had never been in a church service in your life, you knew nothing about Christianity whatsoever, and you read the Bible for the first time, would you imagine that church would look like a group of people watching a performer on a stage up front once a week for an hour? There's no way that if you had zero experience with Christianity and you read the Bible that you would come to the conclusion that Christianity was reduced to a bunch of people sitting and watching a show for an hour. You would think, wow, that's an incredible group of wild, courageous, daring people who live out this faith in close relationship with each other, care for each other's needs. They constantly bring other people around the table. And they either change and transform people, or at times stir people up and make them very angry because their faith is very disruptive in a good way, but very disruptive. So I am going to come back here and the next thing. One of the things that I love is just a quote that Brad Briscoe had about how we have reduced the church in just such a number of ways. But he talks about how we've reduced the church to a place and a gathering. We've reduced Jesus and his ministry just to the cross and not his entire life. And he had a whole list of them. And I thought, you know what? I think it would be great for us to sort of recap the heart of who we are and what we're about and what Jesus has called us to in the world. And the reason that I picked the story of Stephen is I think it's this stubbornness that holds us back. It's a stubbornness that holds us back, because the people that Stephen was speaking to were religious people. They had a concept of what faith looked like. They had an idea of what it looked like to follow God. And someone was coming in and they were saying something different. And they were unable to hang with it because it was different than what was in their mind, what following God was supposed to look like. I think the same thing can happen for us. Is you get sort of stuck in what it means to follow God, what faith should look like, what the church should look like, and we lose our creativity. We lose a larger picture of who God is and what he's like in the world. We take a huge God, this big, with an incredible mission and a massive gospel. We make him that big, this big. And it's a terrible thing and an incredible injustice. And so if you think about, we have reduced the church to a place and a gathering. We've reduced the church to a meeting on one day a week, or a building that you attend. You say things like, are you going to church? And if you think about what the church is and sort of deprogram your mind, you've got this picture when you read the Gospels of a group of people that met from house to house. They broke bread in their homes. They traveled together. They prayed for the people that they were friends with and people that they encountered that were hurting. They ate together. They constantly included others. And it's a beautiful thing. You've got this people movement, this incredible people movement. And if you think of church that way, you could end up with a group of people that are seeking God's kingdom come in a neighborhood and want to see a neighborhood transformed. And so they gather together for a meal and they pray for their neighbors and they meet the needs of their neighbors. And they build relationships and continue to extend their table, and they see more people come around the table and they watch God work in incredible ways. Or you see a place like, even now during a quarantine, a virtual pub that's opened up, as Angie's doing this upcoming week, and people come around Zoom windows and connect and start to build relationships. And as they show some sort of curiosity about faith that some of the people in those Zoom windows have, then they start to gather in separate Zoom calls to sort of process some of their questions and the things that they're wondering about. And as people have needs or things come up, other people in the group say, hey, we'll help you. We'll cover that bill. We'll take care of that problem. And you see a group of people who are committed to the mission of Jesus, who do creative and outside the box things to help each other, serve each other, support each other. And, as they go, they have all kinds of questions and they go back to these stories that Jesus told, and, these different examples of the life of Jesus and what he did and how he approached the world, and sort of process what that looks like for them today. That's exciting. That's absolutely exciting. In fact, I find that when you reduce church to a meeting on one day a week, it actually, for many people, it's the concept of going into a building with people that they don't know, where they're going to sing and read for an hour, is not exciting to them at all. I mean, I thought about this when we moved into our house here, and I connected with a few neighbor friends, and I thought, if the goal for me, as I connect with some of these guys, and some of them don't share my faith at all, if the next step for me is to get them into a setting where we sing and read on a Sunday morning, that's a really hard sell. It really is. But if instead, if we imagine church as a community of people who cared for each other, engaged other people, brought them around the table, and along the way, as people were showing some faith curiosity, you could talk about it. There's no agenda. You don't have to push anything, but imagine if we thought about church as a group of people that were on a mission together to see a community, neighborhood, world around them transform, then maybe I would look at my neighbors not as projects, not as people that I want to get into a service and pray a prayer or something like that. But what if then I started to think about bringing people into settings where they would naturally connect, caring for their needs as needs came up, talking about things that they were curious about, questions that they had, and then allow the Holy Spirit to do whatever the Holy Spirit does. If light bulbs go off and people say, yeah, no, this totally makes sense. I believe this. I want to be on this journey with you. Cool. If not, you've gained a friend. And along the way, who knows? Maybe the person will come to some of the same conclusions that you have. But when we get stuck with this concept of church as a place or a gathering, we reduce the mission of God in the world. The next one, I think, is brilliant here, is we have reduced mission to evangelism and handing out literature. So my grandfather and I were talking years ago, and he said, we were outside of Longwood Gardens and the kids were running around. And he said, did I ever tell you my story about coming to faith and how I found God? And I said, no. And he said, yeah, I was really, I didn't believe in God at all. And he was in the military, drove a tank, and real tough man. And he said that it was his barber that would talk about Jesus to him while he was cutting his hair. And he said, my barber talked about Jesus like he was his friend. And I became so intrigued, and we had all these conversations while my barber was cutting my hair. And as we had these conversations, I found myself starting to believe some of the things that he was saying. I would debate with him and go back and forth, but I found myself coming to the conclusion that, yeah, this makes sense. I believe this. And then he said, so when I found myself believing in Jesus, he said, I started talking about Jesus to the guys that I golfed with, right? Because I was excited about the new faith that I had found with Jesus. So I just started talking about Jesus to the guys that I golfed with. And then some of those guys became excited about Jesus too, and the stuff that I was sharing. And he said, so then I realized I should probably get involved in a church. This is that reductionist thinking of church couldn't be a group of guys that are gathering together on a golf course and then eating meals afterwards and then talking about their faith and praying for each other and including other guys that are going to golf with them and process their faith. Church couldn't be that, right? It was reduced. He had this idea that he had to go to a church building somewhere, right? So he said, I go to a church, and then the church leaders taught me how to do evangelism. And evangelism for him was he had to go around to different houses and hand out pamphlets, knock on doors and hand out pamphlets and invite people to believe in Jesus or to attend their church service on a Sunday morning. And he said nobody would come. He said people were just so hard to the gospel. And I thought, this is crazy. This is what the church has done so often, is that my grandfather was naturally on the mission of Jesus. He was naturally sharing what he was enjoying with the people that he was golfing with. And the church taught him how to be weird and how to go door to door and hand out flyers and be awkward and invite him into this environment invite his friends into this environment that didn't make sense for them, when in reality, he was already naturally talking about his faith in natural ways because he was enjoying it with people that he cared about. And the church sort of talked him out of that and taught him to do something sort of strange over here on the side. And so I think it's critical when we think about the mission of God, which, by the way, what is the mission of God? It isn't that people would pray a prayer and not go to hell. What is the mission of God? It's so much bigger. It's so much bigger than what people have in mind. The mission of God is, as Jesus says, on God's kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. So the mission of God, look around your neighborhood, right? If you're in your house, look out your window. The mission of God is thinking, what would it look like if Jesus showed up in my neighborhood? What would he do? And then you start to think about people who are hungry would be fed. People who lost their jobs would be taken care of. People that are sick would be healed. People that are lonely would have a place at the table. So what is the mission of God? It's that everything that's broken is restored. Everyone that's dealing with guilt understands that there is no more condemnation for those that are in Christ. Those who have no family find family in the family of Jesus. Those who are hurting find restoration and healing. The kingdom of God is that every person, place, and thing is restored so that what we see around us looks like heaven. But yet, we've reduced this story and made it something small, very, very small, and saying, pray this prayer and wait to die. The message of the church has essentially become, you suck, but thank goodness that Jesus came so that you can pray this prayer and not go to hell. It's such a reduction of the bigger picture of what Jesus has come to do. The much bigger picture, so much bigger. And we've reduced it. I love the quote that every heretic has a Bible verse. Every heretic has a Bible verse. So what is heresy? It's taking a piece of the truth and making it the whole truth. What is the gospel, for example? What is the gospel? It isn't that you're a sinner and Jesus has come to die so that you would be forgiven and go to heaven. That's a part of the gospel. It's not the whole thing. It's a part of the gospel. And it is true, and it is good, and it is beautiful. But you want to know some of the rest of the gospel? Some of the rest of the gospel is that there's an enemy who wants to steal and kill and destroy and ruin our lives, and Jesus has defeated the enemy. You know what is good is that there's a broken world. Part of the good news is that there's a broken world that Jesus ultimately restores, and that what we see around us that is broken becomes beautiful again, and that Narnia is restored, and Belle's Castle is restored, and everything is made right again in the end by Jesus. That's really good news, right? The gospel is so much bigger, and when we reduce it to something very, very small, we take away this beautiful, beautiful thing that Jesus has done. Right? We make it this big, right? And unfortunately, when the only tool that you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. And so if the only part of the message that you have is that Jesus died for sinners, you have to make people feel bad before you make them feel good, right? So you got to heap on a bunch of guilt and shame and that sort of thing. But if you think about the questions that some of your friends are asking, they're not, how can I be forgiven? The questions some of your friends are asking are, what about injustice? What about injustice in the world? What about the broken world that we live in, and the sickness and the disease and the cancer and all these sorts of things? What do we do with that? And you go, Jesus has come to give hope in the midst of cancer and death. Jesus has come to free the captives. Jesus has come so that ultimately those who are being oppressed would be set free, and that there would be justice, and that evil people will not win in the end. And that's really, really good news. And If you're struggling with guilt and shame and all of that, Jesus has covered that too. He died on a cross and all of your sin is taken care of as well. It's beautiful, right? So there's this huge and beautiful good news that Jesus has come to declare. And it's called the gospel of the kingdom, right? My kingdom come, my will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Jesus came to declare that this place should look and taste a little bit like heaven, even right now. And that's what the church gets to be, as a little bit of a picture of that people come in and go, oh my gosh, everyone's included, every race and tribe and nation, every sinner is brought around the table, everybody's treated like equals, needs are met, people are treated like family. This is incredible. You go, that's what it looks like when Jesus shows up. When Jesus shows up, nobody is less important. When Jesus shows up, people that are ignored are listened to. When Jesus shows up, people that are sick are healed. When Jesus shows up, people that have no resources now have resources. Thank God. And that's what you and I get to be, is a picture of that beautiful and incredible kingdom that Jesus came to declare. It's good news, right? Super good news. I want you to, as I'm sharing, if you could drop some of your questions or thoughts in the chat. I'm going to come back to that in just a couple minutes. And because I am like super ADD and I put together a bunch of slides, I probably already talked about some of the slides that are going to come up. So I might just breeze right past them because it's just sort of how my weird mind works. But I'm going to pop this up. We've reduced worship to the singing of songs. We're supposed to offer our bodies as an act of worship, that whether we eat or drink or whatever we do it all to bring God's glory, God glory. So there's this, incredible, if you think about how big God is, just simply being aware of the God who is always there and always present, then you won't miss the fact that while yesterday I'm throwing Frisbee with my daughter in the backyard and the breeze is blowing in and I hear the birds, and we just have so many beautiful blue jays and cardinals that fly by in our backyard. And I'm standing there just experiencing God's goodness, going, man, the weather's right. I can smell people grilling. My daughter and I are throwing Frisbee and she's giggling and laughing. I'm watching God's creation and these birds fly by. Tell me that isn't worship. I'm aware of God's creation. I'm thankful for my daughter. I'm experiencing this beautiful thing. And so many of us reduce worship to, worship is songs that we sing on a Sunday, instead of, man, I am experiencing the goodness of God and the presence of God at the table with family or with friends that I enjoy. I'm experiencing the goodness of God and worshiping God as I take a walk through the woods. I'm experiencing the beauty and the presence of God as I sit in stillness with a cup of coffee and listen and allow God to speak to my heart. And when we reduce worship to just singing of songs, then you end up having this faith life that's sort of confined to a box of an hour or 2 hours or a couple meetings on Zoom now. But when you see Jesus as Lord and you experience God in all of life, then you start to experience him when you break bread around the table. You see him as you're sitting on your back porch. You experience him as someone wrongs you and God sort of whispers to your heart, forgive instead of condemn. And all of a sudden worship becomes bigger. It's all of life. Sure, it includes songs, but it also includes bread and coffee and some birds flying by in the backyard. And, I think we do a terrible injustice when we reduce the bigger picture of who God is in the world and make it very, very small again, fortunately. The next, we've reduced the gospel to bullet points. Already talked about that. Moving on. Already quoted that. Oh, here we go. We've reduced discipleship to the transfer of information. How is it that you have people that attend church services for 20, 30 years and they're the biggest jerks you've ever met? How is it that you have people that sit under the teachings of Jesus, they've never made a single disciple, they don't pray, and their community is no different? They've been there for years and years and years, and they're supposed to be little Christ. That's what Christian means, is little Jesus, little Christ. Yet their neighborhood is not transformed. People are not loved. Nobody's come around their table. They don't pray. They don't even know what their spiritual gifts are, right? And so when you reduce discipleship, what it means to be a disciple, to just transfer of information, people can be informed but not transformed. Does that make sense? You can know a lot about Jesus and not live like Jesus at all. But when you think about discipleship, not just as transfer of information, but you think about discipleship as a way of life, then you say, why don't we walk together and do the things together that Jesus did? Rather than just be hearers of the word, we're doers as well, because faith without works is what? It's dead. So if we sit and talk about stuff, or just listen and consume stuff and say, I just want to be fed, I just want someone to tell me things, but we don't live out a faith that's alive and vibrant. Our faith actually, it's non-existent, it's dead, it's ugly. It's the type of thing that God spits out of his mouth. It's disgusting. It's the type of thing that turns people away and they say, I want to be no part of the church. Because those people are just, they don't look anything like Jesus at all. But if you think about discipleship as, why don't we together start to practice the things that Jesus did? Why don't we bless people this week? Why don't we extend our table to people that, don't have any friends, and make our table bigger, right? Why don't we develop our family life together, and as a family, we can care for other people together. So, wouldn't that be good? We've limited ministry to the professionals instead of APEST, Ephesians 4, all the gifts, apostle, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, teacher, everybody, every one of you is filled with the same, as followers of Jesus, every one of you filled with the same Holy Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead. You are not, God did not interrupt your life and invite you into this wild journey so that you could sit and watch. He wanted you to be a part of his transformation work in the world. He has empowered you and gifted you and filled you with ideas and opportunities and uniquely called you to do things that make the world right again in little places. So if you think about ministry as the professionals, you go, the ministers are the people that we pay and we watch. But if you think of Ephesians 4, where Paul, sort of puts it out there, to each and every one of us are given these gifts: apostle, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, teacher. That was read aloud to men, women, children, slaves. Every one of us are given these gifts. That the Holy Spirit has filled you, that every one of us are given these gifts. And apostolic gifting is a missionary gift: sending, go create, develop, start new things, entrepreneurial kind of gift. If you have ideas, come up with something, start something, create something, do something. change the world for the good. The prophets are the ones that are standing up for injustice, that are stepping into the mess, that are calling us back to do what God wants us to do, that are saying, let's really listen to the Spirit and obey God in the world. And the evangelists are saying more people need to be brought around the table. What about people that have not experienced family and community? Who else can we open our patios to and social distance with? What does that look like? That's the evangelist. The shepherds are going, how do we love people, care for people, listen to people, support people well? The teachers are your storytellers going, let's talk about the experiences that we've had and the way that God's changed our lives. And let me tell you my story, and they're sharing those stories. We all have these gifts. You each are wired uniquely to change the world around you. And when we limit ministry to a couple of people instead of each of us kind of owning, we are the church. Not what is NRC going to do, what's the church going to do, but when each and every one of us, when each person on this Zoom call says, what am I going to do? What are we going to do together? What can we create? How can we start things? And you kind of come with this creative, imaginative mind of what could it be? What could we do? Not what are you going to do? And we say, what are we going to do? How do we build it, create it, design it? We were made in the image of the Creator to be creators, to build things and design things and do things and start things and meet from house to house and go to different places and see things restored and see people loved and meet the needs of those around. We get to do that. You don't watch or wait for a organization to do it. We are the church. You are the church. You, me, we get to do this. And as soon as we, rather than say, nah, it's up to the professionals, and we kill our impact, absolutely destroy our impact. Imagine if somehow you could get 90% of the players off the field. If you could take most of your team and sideline them, you'd totally kill your effectiveness. What if you awaken the sleeping giant and you got every player on the field? Everybody in their unique gifting is enjoying and flying and soaring and doing what they were made to do. And that, gosh, I don't want to do it. I want us to do it together. I want every single person to be alive and creating and doing and making a difference out of their gifts and callings. And finally, I don't even know if this is the last slide. Oh, okay. This I thought was fascinating. I shared with some of the churches that I'm coaching this past week, how people learn. Okay, super fascinating. At the top of this pyramid, it says this is about retention rates. If you hear a lecture, you retain 5% of it. Okay. If you read something, you're able to retain and remember and keep in 10% of it. You get a visual 20%. Now look at the bottom. You teach other people, it sticks with you. You practice it, sticks with you. You discuss it with a group of people, it sticks with you, right? So if you think about what churches have traditionally done, we say that church equals a lecture on a Sunday morning where people watch. Retention rate, the ability to actually remember it and keep it in and keep it with you, is only 5%. Only 5%, but we've actually built the church around that. Now, think about what Jesus did with his disciples. He discussed with a group of people the truths and his teachings in a small group of people, and then they did it together. They practiced it together. Jesus and the 12, they went out, loved people, healed people. He sent them out in pairs. They came back. They lived this life together. And then he sent them out to teach other people. It's retention, right? So if you think about the ministry of Jesus, it was primarily focused around the bottom three. Now, he did some of the other stuff. He did lecture and he read the scrolls, and there was visual demonstration, all that kind of stuff. But if you think about where you see most of his ministry, you see it around a small group of people discussing the truth, practicing it together, and then he sends them out. As the Father sent me, I send you. Everything you've seen and heard of me, go and practice these things and teach other people, right? So you get that sort of thing. Now, why do I share that? This is how we've attempted to build NRC. We've attempted to build NRC through microchurches, where groups of people talk about the truths of God together, practice them together, right? And then we send other people out to do the same thing. So what's a next step for some of you during quarantine? If you're thinking, I don't want to reduce the mission of God in the world. I don't want to be just a spectator. If you're with us today, you don't want to be a spectator because you're a part of a church that's designed around going, not just sitting and gathering people to watch. You're a part of a group of people that's committed to making a difference in the world and going. So what's a great next tangible step? Well, one of the things we've developed at NRC is these reach rhythms. You get a group of people together and say, what would it look like to follow Jesus in the world today that would be a breath of fresh air? Well, now during the quarantine, rather than just busy, go, we're going to rest together as a family. Get a group of people that are going to meet on Zoom and talk about these rhythms together. How is your family resting together? How are you taking a break as a family with your kids? How are you resting yourself? Are you reading and reflecting and praying and being refreshed? What is God saying to you? Then the next rhythm, eat, engage. Jesus ate with people. Jesus ate with religious people. Jesus ate with prostitutes and addicts and everything else. So who are we going to eat with and engage with? Stuff like what Angie's doing with Virtual Pub, stuff like grabbing coffee over Zoom windows, stuff like social distancing with a few friends in someone's front yard or something. Who am I going to engage with and include, especially when people are feeling incredibly lonely? What does it look like to include people around the table or through Zoom windows this week? Who am I going to bless? Act of love. Who am I going to bless? What do you need? How can we help each other? Confess, because this isn't about, just a set of to-dos that we can feel better about ourselves, but where do you feel like you're broken? Where do you feel like you screwed up? And we're able to confess and share our imperfection and vulnerabilities. And then home life. So a great next step, and I can send that to whoever wants it, would be in your own home or with a couple friends or over a Zoom window, say, let's talk about these rhythms and who are some people we can help? What are some needs that we can meet? Who else can we bring around the table to talk and process and create community? And then we start to practice these type of things. It's fun, actually a lot of fun. And it's faith that's alive, and you get to do it, and I'll help you create it. But now I'm going to take some time and just answer any questions or any feedback that you guys have on the side here, and we'll pray. Again, this is for some of you, you've heard it, but it's a great sort of recentering on who we are and what we do and why, and the stuff that holds us up, which is stubbornness kind of junk. All right, we got how do I start a micro church from my wife privately? My wife's in the back patio. She's prompting me with my next thing to share. How do you start a micro church? You can contact me directly, and I'll help you figure out how to gather a couple people that are curious about walking out some rhythms together and helping some other people. And it can be a lot of fun. I mean, I'm ready now during quarantine to do a video Zoom training to help people who want to start some things. But we do 3 different settings, right? Because people are not projects, and some people may never be interested in your faith. And we're not pushing people. We're just not hiding what matters to us, right? And so we like to play with 3 different environments. The first would be party serve, because everybody wants to connect relationally. Everyone wants to be a part of a barbecue or picnic table or social distancing on a lawn or whatever. And everybody wants to somehow feel like they're helping other people, making a difference. So we create those environments because all of our friends, whether they're Christians or not, want to be a part of those types of environments. Then as we connect with other people, we find that people oftentimes are curious about what makes us tick and what we believe and why. So then we create environments where people can be curious and dip their feet in and ask questions and talk about stuff that they're wondering, right? That's a second environment. The third environment is a group of people who actually want to follow Jesus and say, what does it look like to love our neighbors, serve people, create community, understand the teachings of Jesus? That's sort of what we call like a very intentional space. But I can help you guys create that. Whoever wants to do it during the quarantine, I'll help you do it with a group of people over Zoom windows. I'll join you for the first several, help you create something if you're not a part of something. Yeah, thanks, wife. Any other questions? Yeah, Jesus would not just drop off a pamphlet. That is true. So impersonal, right? Okay. Nothing else? Thank you. You're welcome. I love my relationship with God. I appreciate every minute of every day. I like doing things for others. How do I get involved? Yeah. One, I think you're doing it. I think, frankly, this is a private message, so I'm not going to call this person out, but I think it's a great question of the person who asked me this question is serving other people, helping other people. I love their selflessness. I think the big key is including other people, because whatever you do, other people need to learn how to serve and bless others as well. And it's good not to be alone in that. And I think you're doing that. I'm pretty sure you have other people involved as well. So praying with them, talking about what you're learning, and creating some community around serving other people. Just continue to do that. And if you need some help, support, coaching, we can talk offline, you and I. It's great. Good. Well, guys, I'm gonna pray, and then we can all say hi to each other. Whoever wants to stick on and say hi and chat for a few minutes, we can do that. And if you have any questions offline, just shoot me a text. If you'd like any of the stuff that I shared, just put something in the chat here or send me a private message. I can send you the reach rhythms or how people retain information graph or any of that stuff. Happy to share that with you. Cool. It's so weird when I don't hear anyone, you know? You just say cool, and I think I heard a bird outside. So weird. All right, let me pray. God, we just thank you so much for a beautiful day. I think it's going to be 70 again. I look forward to going outside and feeling the warm air and laughing with my kids. Help all of us as we go about our days, not to reduce our experience of you to a couple gatherings, but that we would see and hear from you throughout the day as we eat meals and sit outside and play with our kids or talk to our friends or get on Zoom windows, that we'd get a bigger picture of worship and community and mission and church, and that you'd spark so many of us with creative ideas, that we'd think about different ways to include our friends, that we would see your mission in the world not as just simply getting people to pray a prayer, but seeing everything that's broken restored, that we'd see relationships healed, and people's needs met, and communities transformed, and people that are struggling with guilt understanding that their guilt has been taken care of, and that every person here would experience freedom, not on just one level, but on a bunch of different levels. And I pray that we would continue to connect through the week and help and support each other as a larger family, that we'd even get creative about that, because we're limited to video and some distancing kind of stuff. So I thank you for these friends. I thank you for their support and encouragement. I thank you for the cool ideas I get all week that not everyone on this call even knows about, but I just know there are so many people that are here in these Zoom windows doing so many incredible things. And I thank you for them. I thank you for their giving. I thank you for their generosity, for how they're helping other people. I thank you that NRC as a church during this time period of quarantine, that people are continuing to give toward the vision so we can turn around and bless other people. That's crazy. While so many churches are begging for help and money during this period, I find that we're turning around and giving money away to bless people, and that's great. While so many churches are wondering about how they're going to keep their doors open and asking about when or how they're going to reopen, we never closed. We got a group of people that are alive and living their faith and doing it over Zoom and connecting at a distance, and this church never closed, and the gates of hell won't prevail against it, and that's pretty sweet. We just have a neat group of people that are alive and passionate and creative and fun and outside the box, and I thank you for them. They help us to keep imagining and creating and connecting. We love you. Amen. Guys, thank you for connecting. Whoever's watching this later, I hope you enjoyed the last half of it. You can unmute yourself and say hi now.